So recently, a new documentary hit Netflix called The Social Dilemma. You've probably heard of it. If you haven't heard of it, you've been living under a rock. It's quite the special documentary. It's a couple hours long. It really goes into the breaking down of what social media is kind of doing to the human psyche, what it's doing to our behavior, what it's doing to our relationships, what it's doing to our work and our productivity. It kind of covers all-encompassing thing, but really it's kind of trying to sound the alarm on kind of how social media has affected all of us. And so from the Christian perspective, I think it's important for us to evaluate something like this. So often we allow the culture to kind of take the lead on instances like this, and it's important for people that are Christians, people of faith, to really assess something like this. And this being Ex Nihilo channel, we're really assessing it through the lens of its health, not just physical health, but also in the all-encompassing of the human body, the human psyche, the mind, body, and the spirit. So, what are some of the effects of this on us? I'm going to give you a few takeaways, kind of what I assessed from the film. Right off the bat, I think it's clear as you're watching The Social Dilemma, someone who maybe is a Christian, you're watching it, I think it's clear that we're living in a human experiment. We haven't had social media for very long. We've had it for, a couple years. I remember being in college, I signed the paperwork to get Facebook on my college campus. So we're really, really new in this experiment. We don't have large amounts of data as to how social media is going to affect us as humans. We don't have large amounts of data on how it affects our relationships. We even know, things like blue blocking glasses have kind of come to the forefront because of all of the time we're spending in front of screens, but this is relatively new. We're 15 years into the experiment on large-scale technological use. So we really have to assess it through that lens. We are living through an experiment. Now, Facebook, Instagram, social media like TikTok or Snapchat, Twitter, things like that, all of these different social medias are really pulling at us in different ways. And so the film talks about largely how people from Las Vegas, were hired at Facebook and Google to create some of the technology surrounding Gmail, surrounding Facebook, to create an addiction. And what they're doing is they're not just producing a product that will, entice you. In fact, they're trying to manipulate your biology so that you would become addicted to the product, because if your eyes are on the product, then you become a product yourself, and now you're able to be marketed to with Facebook ads, Twitter ads, Instagram ads. Like, all of us have gotten them, right? Many of us have even been near our phones and have heard, said something, and then all of a sudden our phone heard that, and now we're getting an ad for it later. We don't really understand the long-term effects it's going to have on all of our relationships. And so what we're doing is we're entering into a game, so to speak, where we really don't understand the actions. Now, early data has come out, and that's part of what the documentary is trying to explain, where we're understanding that we're more depressed and anxious than we've ever been, and that certainly our productivity has gone down, our long-term memory is going away, all as a result of staring at social media for long periods of time. My takeaway as someone who's a Christian from this perspective of really everything kind of being an experiment is, don't assume anything about what's happening in your body as a result of social media. Don't make assumptions that you're fine by being on it all day, or that you just can understand, or that this is just the way the world is. I'd be very careful about doing that, because we just really don't understand. We used lead-based paint for a long period of time, and we realized that was not good, and we realized that asbestos was not really good to put in your house anymore. We're realizing that some of the things we did and was common knowledge for long periods of time ends up harming us. So it's important that as we hang out on social media and as we partake of it, that it's potentially dangerous for us, and especially the long-term effects on stress and anxiety and depression, like the documentary talks about. Second takeaway is that popular opinion doesn't make something okay. And really what the film really discusses is it talks about the numbers of tens and hundreds of millions of users on some of these platforms, and not just the social media platforms, but also the email clients, and some of how addicted these things can be. And just because we all believe that something is working for us and it's good doesn't make it all right. I think that is the foundation for even the Christian worldview, that just because the world or the popular opinion or the people, the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age are all saying something, that doesn't mean that we should just wholesale accept it as good. I think we're really starting to discover here in the kind of late aught teens and into the 20s that what we're realizing, human beings are crucially being affected and tormented even by social media, and this can be damaging. I'm not saying here, I'm not advocating certainly for a whole-scale shutdown of your social media. I'm not sure what I'm advocating for actually as I watch this documentary, but I think it's important for us to just be careful, and just because a lot of people are doing something doesn't make it okay. And that brings me to my next thought, and I think it's that some of us may not be mature enough to have social media. I think that's important for us to realize, because social media itself is all about promoting a brand. It's all about creating kind of an image of yourself and casting that image out and setting it before the people and hoping that they'll accept it. But one of the ramifications of kind of deleting your social media altogether, as some of the pundits say on the documentary, is that we actually aren't buying into that anymore, that we're not really worried about what other people think. We're not really worried about the consequences, and we're certainly not worried about creating an image of ourselves and hoping that other people like it. We're saying that, simply we're not mature enough. Now, what do I mean by what we're not mature enough? I don't mean that, your 8-year-old shouldn't have social media because they're not old enough. What I mean is that we might not understand how to use it because it's an experiment, and we might not know how to handle it personally. Instagram particularly is really interesting because there's this concept in scripture called the lust of the eyes, and it's all about this idea that as we see things, we lust for them, and it pulls our attention away from God, and it pulls our attention towards some other object. Well, the lust of the eyes, Instagram really is this personification, this manifestation of it in the physical form. So we're able to look at things online like people's money, people's cars. We're coveting their lives. We're coveting their vacations, and we're coveting their bodies, and we're seeing all these different things of them, and we start to long for those things, not just even more than what we have, but even more than God. It's Himself. So we have to be very careful whether or not we're mature. A pastor friend of mine once told me he deleted his Twitter because he told me he wasn't mature enough, and he's 47, 48-year-old man. At the time, I'm in my mid-20s. And kind of took me back because I was like, well, I'm old enough for it. Why aren't you old enough? And he said, no, I'm not. It's not that I'm not old enough for it. It's that I'm not mature enough for it. I don't know how to use it well. I'm not good enough. Now, you may be mature enough. Maybe you think you are. But it's getting to the point with a lot of different social media where, maybe we're not mature enough. Maybe we don't know how to handle that. And maybe it might be costing us our friendships, our marriages, and certainly our mental health. Now, some of us may not be mature enough for social media, but that doesn't make it a bad thing. I think that actually is incredibly wise to realize something about yourself that you're limited in. Understanding being limited is a positive thing. So we have to be careful with ridiculing people because they think, I'm not good at it. This guy can't get on social media because he can't, not covet other people's lives. No, that's probably not wise. I think it's good that we recognize that we're not mature enough for something. As Jesus says, it's better to cut off your hand if it's causing you to stumble, or cast out your eye if it's causing you to stumble, than it is to go into hell with your eye or your hand. So I think it's incredibly prudent of us to understand our limitations if we can't handle social media. Number 4, and I think this one's most crucial, and I think the documentary really speaks to this. We are in less control of what we do and say than we think. We are all being programmed by social media, and this is a really fascinating concept. We're really getting into AI, especially now, and really figuring out how these algorithms can manifest and manipulate human behavior pretty easily. You see it with the controversy behind election manipulation and whether or not social media had an ability to change public opinion. We're seeing it with kind of mainstream media right now. Mainstream media is manipulating people's beliefs and thoughts and really polarizing the country as a result. So we're in less control than we think, which means that we should probably have less confidence in our own ability to make smart decisions surrounding social media, and we should probably put more credence into who God is and what He's doing, and understanding, going to Him, kneeling before Him and saying, hey, listen, I just don't have all the answers. So I think it's important for us as we go to our friends to say the same thing. Hey, listen, I just don't know if I'm mature enough for this. I might not know the answers to that, and to be okay with just not understanding that you have the full picture, because listen, we're just not in control as much as we think we are. The last thing I think is really helpful, for Christians as it relates to the social dilemma. Think about this three-pronged paradigm: receive, reject, and redeem. Receive, reject, redeem. Everything that we look upon, everything that we see, everything that we use can be put into one of these 3 categories. We can either receive it outright, we can receive it as it is without needing to change it, We can reject it outright, like, hey, this is just ungodly, it's sinful, it's not good for my body, it's not good for my mental health, it's not good for my my behavior. Or we can redeem some things. That means there's certain things that have been kind of manipulated, twisted, and turned and messed with in the culture that actually we can actually use in a God-honoring way if we so choose to do so. So when it comes to your social media, you're going to have to make a decision. Can we receive social media as a whole? Should we reject it? And or can we redeem social media? My opinion is, and it may change, is that I think social media is in the redeem category. Certainly, we can't receive it wholesale. There's just too much evidence to the contrary, and the documentary points that out. But I do think there are probably good God-honoring ways to use social media that don't cause health issues, that don't cause mental health, anxiety, and depression. I think social media is probably best used in small doses, and so utilizing things like screen time, giving a family member or friend a passcode so that you don't have access to all day social media, so you don't go down these rabbit holes, so you're off of YouTube as much as you can possibly be, and then utilizing it for small bouts of entertainment. I think that's potentially possible. Certainly things with like filters, so you're not able to get a hold of different, obscene content, things like that. That could be helpful. But you're gonna have to make that decision. Is social media receive? Is it in a category of reject? Or is it in a category of redeem? Overall, I think Social Dilemma was fantastic. I'm gonna recommend that to anybody to go watch this, because you're gonna at least get the facts behind social media. If you're someone who's like a strong social media advocate, you love social media, you should still watch this, because you do need to know that there are some downsides to utilizing social media. And if you're someone who's a naysayer, you might maybe feel a little bit more confirmed in your beliefs about it. But either way, if you have Netflix, you can check it out. So anyway, thanks so much for watching the channel. Would you like this video? If it was helpful, would you subscribe to my YouTube channel? And I'll catch you on the next one.